There we are. Hello, Julie. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Hi, Heather. Thanks for having me.
This feels very personal. So, for those listening, I know Julie. Well, uh, yeah, it's been, let's say, 18 years ish,
At least.
very long time. I put my oldest in one of your childcare centers, and I had to go on government assistance to do so. Or I was on government assistance, so I'd do subsidy to get him into your Montessori.
Hmm.
And I
Yes.
remember having the mindset of how can I and what is the best that I could possibly do. And yeah, it was a game changer. And I remember meeting you and just thinking, I love her attitude. I love her mindset and her perspective. So that's it.
Well, we love both of you and can't believe how far you
Mhm.
have both come. So awesome. Just like an incredible story of perseverance and getting at it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're a living, breathing example of what can happen.
Yeah.
I have a lot of honor, I guess, for you. But also, I feel like we have a similar road. I wasn't on government assistance with my kiddos, but I was as a kiddo, living in that type of a environment and neighborhood and a mom with three jobs. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, just a feeling I was really, I think, attracted to you because I was like, yes, this mom is killing it and doing the best she can for these kids.
Mhm.
And you were in school too, I think, at the time, right? Or
Yep.
working.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have been, yeah, I
Oh,
was in the university, had Logan. By the time I graduated university, had Calvin the second one,
yeah.
like during exams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That's
you
the
killed it,
integrated
girl.
life. If you want
Yes.
something, it's like the how can I attitude. And one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you is because you have come obviously so far, but when we were chatting before I hit record, talking about like unconventional freedom and wealth and how, I'll attract a lot of women listening for many, many different reasons. But one of the things that I'm becoming very obsessed with is money, financial literacy skills, especially for women, because, we're sold this vision of freedom, do the thing, become the business owner. Yeah, great. You're making money. Now, what do you do with the money? So, I want to just give you the microphone for a minute to tell a little bit about your story, your wealth story, and don't hold anything back because I think it's very inspiring for women who are listening who want to have that legacy for their families.
Yeah. So, I guess in terms of like, a non conventional life, I had the opposite non conventional life, I think I started with. So, you know, coming from immigrant family, my parents were both from Italy, so they came when they were really young. We grew up in a very entrepreneurial immigrant family. My grandpa made took that leap of faith, came to Canada with like nothing but pretty much the shirt on his back, a couple bucks in his pocket. Started working, if you're from Windsor or Canada in the area, worked in Leamington at the farms. I mean, you're Italian, tomato farmers seem to be the next best thing to do. So started from a really modest beginning. My family, my mom's side, Italian as well, came to Canada similarly, but he was a barber. So he was a little better off because he had a trade and he worked in the military. And so both of them were prisoners of war, escaped it, the whole thing, like just a super cool story. But my grandparents, my mom's dad, the barber, he decided to put a little barber shop on Erie Street. So we started this little barbershop. My grandma was super smart and she was like, we should buy the real estate. We're paying this rent. So slowly but surely, they bought the one piece of real estate. My parents were like, wow, we really need a hardware store around here. There's nowhere. All these people were walking. Let's open a little shop. So they did. Everything was great until it wasn't. So then the recession hit, and they had just expanded into a second business with another family. So a partnership. The business didn't make enough for both partners. Long story short, everything fell apart, including their marriage. So they lost pretty much everything. My dad left, and we were two littles with my mom, who was working, night and day trying to make ends meet. And she didn't want to lose our house. Her whole thing was, I want to stay in my house with my kids. So I saw like massive amounts of grind my whole life, like 7 a.m., 10 p.m. She would work like in an office during the day and then at Sears, which was like, like a retail shop way back then. And so I just saw her constantly grinding. And so, in some degree, that was very motivating for me because I was like, man, she's not going to stop. Like, she's just going to keep on keeping on to get things done here. And that was a huge lesson for me. And that adversity, although it was challenging at the time, I really truly believe that made me who I was or who I am today. So that's sort of my first and foremost part of like historically where I kind of came from. And then I went to school. I was the first one to go to university because at the time, like, you're Italian, right? So my family was like, you're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, or something that you're going to have a really good income. You don't want to live in the struggle constantly, right? And that was me. I was like, I want to get out of this neighborhood. I want to like see the world. Like, I was just a dreamer, right? I always had this idea of like, I always thought big, but and bigger, right? Like, I never thought go big, go home. It was like go big, go bigger. That sort of was always in my mindset because I think I just really wanted to get out of where we were. So went to school
Really,
to
I'm
be
just, as soon as you say that, like, that's the visionary, right? And
right.
the personality trait. Do you think, I'm just curious, do you
Yeah.
think you can instill that in people, or it's like they're born that way?
I think I think that a lot of it is your innate persona, like who you are deep in your soul. But I also think circumstance can help or hinder that, right?
Mm.
It can either fire it up or really suppress it. And we talk a lot in my book. I wrote a book as well, but in my book about trauma and how to use it towards abundance rather than not. And some people get cyclically stuck in
Yeah.
this idea of like, woe is me, things are happening to me. I'm like, things are happening for me. Let's figure out why this is going on. What is someone trying to tell me here? What's the energy around this, right? And so I always had a really good gut instinct. I operate 90% of my decisions are made on instinct and energy, how I feel about things, which seems a little strange for people, but
Very much my language, but
okay.
yes, I'm not a data-driven spreadsheet person,
Yeah.
which I need to hire those people to
Mhm.
balance it out.
Same. Yep. So I have a great bench who does all of those things for me. But I, as an entrepreneur, as a mom, as all the things, my gut reaction guides most of my performa in
Mhm.
personal and professional life. Getting back to how things started, I went to law school. I hated it. I was like, this sucks. It's terrible. I hate reading all these boring freaking laws. It's like detrimental to me. But I was like, what am I going to do? My parents are like expecting this like product. And, when you're brought up in a family that sacrifices a lot for you, you feel super indebted, right? And so it was no fault of theirs. They were really trying to strive for us to just be better than where they were or where they came from. But there was always something sort of in the back of my mind, a few like trauma things, right? Like, you have to be this, you have to make sure you can make money. You have to be sustainable. Like, if your husband ever leaves you, you're going to have to be able to deal with this on your own, right? Like, all these things that do you just kind of pocket in your brain as you're growing up. Also, not having a father figure, there's a lot of things that not present anyways, right? Some of those insecurities that you build up yourself. And then also with a money mindset, always the scarcity, like, you're never going to have enough, you're going to lose everything. You always have to have this background plan, this indoctrination of the journey has to be so set, right? And so I was always a black sheep. I will say that from day one. I've always was pushing boundaries. I was always the one in trouble. I was the first of the four grandkids, so I was kind of a leader in a good and bad way, right? So just lots of things that were unconventional about me in the beginning, looking back now. So answering your question, I don't know if it's nature, nurture. I think it's definitely a mix for me. My dad is very entrepreneurial and he's kind of a black sheep. So I feel like that was passed on like from genetics. My mom is straight and narrow and balanced and super fair and all about just and kind-hearted and generous. So I think I got a little bit of both of their great stuff. Probably got a lot of their bad too, but But so I didn't go, I ended up leaving law school in the second year. And I was like shitting my pants trying to tell my parents that I was going to leave. Right. And I was like, maybe I just won't mention anything. Like they probably won't even know. Yeah, that's not true. So,
The first
uh,
moment of the pants shitting journey where you're like, I'm sure you've had to have those conversations again and again, and then they get to the point where like, this is Julie. This is
yeah.
Julie. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I went to my mom, who's working three jobs trying to help me, I had student loans and she was trying to help me. And I said, I'm quitting like law school. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, and she's like, you're doing so well. Like, I don't understand what happened. What's going on? Like, did something happen? I was like, but I was working in a Montessori preschool before and after school while I was going to university. And I was like, I absolutely love this. Like, I love the kids. I always babysat. Like, I had jobs since I was able to have a job, right? So I babysat, I dug graves, I did everything, literally. I had the craziest journey. And I was working in this,
Randomly slides in there. I dug
yeah,
graves.
random.
I worked at a Montessori and I dug graves. If
I
that is not
did,
the
yeah.
definition of a hustler, I don't know what is.
At one point, I was digging graves during the day. Well, I was a horticulturist for a cemetery.
Okay.
Okay, that's what they called it in the paper. Whatever, it was a little more than that.
A
And
nice
then
isolating experience if you just want
it
to
was very
listen to your
peaceful,
thoughts. Yeah.
super peaceful.
Yeah.
So I was doing that during the day. I was waiting tables at LaGuardia Pizza Place at night. And then I was working at the gym that I wanted to belong to because I couldn't afford the gym. So I just worked and they gave me a free membership. So at one point I had three jobs and I was taking 5 classes at the U. So like, it's just insanity. I don't really know how I got through those years, but I did. But why I was telling you was because I came home and of course the first shitting moment was telling my mom. And then when I told her what I wanted to do, right, I was like, I think I'm just going to be a Montessori preschool teacher. It's amazing. Like these kids are learning the absolute way I wish we had, were able to learn, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me and she goes, so you're going to be a babysitter? And I was like, dang, girl. Yeah, an educated babysitter. So initially, though, I think my mom thought, she said to me, you're going to be broke your whole life. Like
Yeah.
you're going to work really hard and this is not an easy job and you're going to be broke. Like this isn't going to help you. You're not going to love this. Right. And so I remember when I'll tell the story about how I got to school. But so the first kind of entrepreneurial venture of mine was bringing these kids into my mom's basement the first summer I worked at Michelle's. And so she closes in the summer, like most Montessori's, and all the parents were like, hey, what are you doing for the summer? Do you want to babysit? Well, I got like 3, 4, 5 of those. And I was like, why don't I just start it? They come to me. I can have all these 11, 12 kids in my mom's house on Marintet in the hood, whatever. They were like, sure. They all brought them, right?
Which would
So
be like illegal today.
oh, totally illegal. And what I did was I went to the dollar store and like made all the materials because I didn't have no money to start a school. And so I remember I was cooking them like lunch, mac and cheese, blah, 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 whatever. We were playing in the backyard of my mom's house was a park and right down the street was a cemetery. So we would play in those all day long. The kids had a great time. The parents were like, wow, they really loved it. Went back. And then in the fall, they were like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, I just want to start my own school. Like, I love this. I was growing her school. I'm like, I know how to do this myself. Long story short, I had no money. So I was like, I'm not really sure how this is going to happen. I saw an ad in the paper for, business credit. Hey, get business credit, da, da, da. And, I took my then boyfriend, now husband, Beau, and he came with me and it said like business credit up to da da da. And I knew I only needed 25 grand. I was like, but at the time that was a lot of money when you have zero money and nobody will lend you any money, by the way, when you have no money. They only start lending you money when you have a shit ton of money. So it's kind of funny. But so we went and if you're from Windsor, it's downtown. It's right behind the McDonald's. It's not a great area. There was this little burgundy door. We go in, it was like Stephen King movie. Like the light was, going back and forth. It was a little table with a guy behind it. And he was like, hello, da, da, da. He looks at Beau and he's like, okay, we have this loan, we're going to approve it for you after I told, my whole story. And he's like, it's $25,000 at 19%. And he looks at Beau and he says, so, because he was the only one with a real job. at that time, right? He had an internship job, which wasn't even a real job. He said, I hope you love this girl, because if she doesn't pay, like, we're going to come after you. And he looks at me like, what am I doing here? Like, so he signed the loan. We got the loan. We started in the basement of the church with 11 kids. By the end of the first year, we had 75. I paid back Malcolm in year one, which was crazy. But everyone says, well, Julie, how did you let Beau do that? Like, that was really kind of shitty of you, right? And I said, no, I knew in my heart that I would take whatever it took to get that loan paid for. And working 2 or 3 jobs plus teaching all day. And I don't know if you know anything about like preschool basement churches. We had to take everything in and out every day. So like set up all the classroom, clean it all, put it away at night so that karate and all these other places could come in. So we literally started our journey where I was the teacher, janitor, cook, assistant, enrollment officer, accounting, all the hats. And Beau would come home from internship and mop the floors before the next group would come in for me, because it was like, 6 to 6 basically every day.
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
How old were you at that time?
So I had just gotten back from my sort of beginning university stint. So I'd say it was probably like 26 when I started ish. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to the moment when it's like you have to be a risk taker, right? In order to do things like this. I always say, Visa was my like business loan. Like I just like, hey, how high can you put this? And then when I was trying to retrain my brain, which I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, every time I would like pay off $1,000, I would call them and be like, lower my credit 1,000, because I just had to retrain my brain not to like fill it up. And then finally I was like, oh, I can have the credit and I feel safe having the credit and I'm making the cash now. So, but I remember starting, I was like, how much will you give me?
And I couldn't even get credit. I asked, because I had so many student loans and I had been gone away and hadn't had any work history, because I went to Europe for a little bit and came back and did all the things you do during university when you can't afford them, but you just rack up a ton of bills. So I had like bad or no credit basically. And they were not giving me anything. Like when I tell you this was my only option, it was this or asking family. And I had already owed my mom money, right? So I was like, I can't ask her. And she barely has enough to manage her own stuff, although she was a super saver. So she always had that rainy day fund, right? But I wasn't going to take that from her, or I don't think she would have let me anyways at that point. But really, I didn't have any credit, right? And so running a business like that, later on, I'll tell you how that helped me. But running a business with no credit is also an enormous feat if anyone's, had a business. So yeah, we used to run a lot.
And what was Beau like? Was he like 100%, I trust and believe in anything that you do, you are going to make this happen?
Yeah, I have to say, like, since day one, he's been my like super biggest supporter ever. Still today, when I have crazy ideas, he's like, all right, if you think it's going to work, let's do it. Like he was a child psychologist. He was a doctor. He went to school for 15 years, Heather, and had a big practice, right? He was a therapist. He did all the things. He had like 200 and some families at one point under his care. And after my first sale, that's kind of a timeline, but we moved over here and he like quit everything, right? For me, for us. And we grew the empire together because we knew vertically, like you can grow each other or you can grow like your own thing. And we were like, let's just grow this like an empire together. And I couldn't do all the things here. So long story short, we opened the school. We started, you were part of this. We were expanding and growing and had multi-site locations. Then we had a private equity sale in 2011.
So how many locations did you have in Canada? Is that where you were growing in Canada, like in locally?
So I had about 10, like all at different times. So once I had the not-for-profit, remember, then I moved it and then we built other ones. So I think at the end it was like a bunch of kind of more super centers, but at one point we were running like 10 different locations, just kind of pieces everywhere, right? Because we were trying to build this without owning a ton of real estate because we didn't have that kind of money.
Right.
At the end, I packaged, like everything was running, right? And then private equity approached us, and I was like, hell no, like I just got, like, this is going so good. We're making money. Our purpose is being filled. We're impacting so many lives. And then they came back again and then again. And then the number just kept getting more and more attractive. And I said to Beau, like, at the end of the day, everything is for sale for a price in business. And so we had to be really attentive, I guess, to like, what is our family trajectory going to look like with this type of a change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, although it was hard for me to kind of disassociate the financial part of things with the impact and everything, that I was like, had bigger plans. I was going to grow this thing, into like
Mm-hmm.
the suburbs and Leamington and I was just going to go. And so, but we had a buyout in 2011, and then I had a non-compete in mostly all of Canada. So I took a little
So
break, went into.
describe, I know this is like your everyday language, but
Yeah.
I'm going to describe private equity, define that.
Sure. Well, basically, it's like large companies that want to come in. They have a bunch of investors. Sometimes it's a family office, sometimes it's just stockholders, whatever. And they come in and they buy childcare centers, and they create a really big portfolio of
Mm-hmm.
childcare centers. So, well, ours was childcare centers. It can be real estate, it can be whatever industry you want. But what they're looking for is they're usually looking for multi-site centers where they can pop in a regional or something to watch over them, and they usually are looking for really high quality, operations that are running really well, people, execution, strategy, cash, like everything kind of buttoned up, so
Mm-hmm.
that they really just come in and maybe add a few things, increase the value of the company over 3 to 5 years, and they grow their portfolio like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what private equity does, and in the most basic terms of it. There's surely a lot behind that, but that's how I would describe it.
And you're building all of these centers from a place of impact, right?
Yeah,
Like you want to make an
100%.
impact and you're learning about business as you go. So obviously, I can see the bio of that. Yeah, financially supportive, but on an identity basis as well is like, I can see the like coming in and more and more and more, right? Like sales is always like, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, and like coming back, but you being like, oh crap, now I'm kind of forced to think bigger.
Mhm,
I have to learn new skills.
mhm.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
So, like, just talking about that, my whole thing when I started these schools was I wanted to impact 1,000 kids, right? So
Mhm,
that was my like why. So I that was such a huge, big, hairy, audacious goal when you have 13 kids in the basement of a church. Like, that
mhm,
is insane, right? Like, even thinking about that goal now, I'm like, like, how did I even come up with that?
mhm,
And we superseded that, right? Because we talk about this in my book too, but about targets, right? So lots of folks get into things, and yes, it's about impact, but they're not really creating or solidifying or delineating targets. And
mhm,
so I always had that sort of big, hairy, audacious target goal in the corner. And then every month or a few months, I'd have a target to hit, right? Because I was really trying to stay intentional about growing. And so every time I'd hit that target, I'm like, well, that target was too low, and I'd move it, right? And
mhm.
I'd move it and I'd move it. So in terms of impact, yes, my why was based 1,000% in impact. And I think that's why we did so well, because I wasn't basing my target just on a financial number, right?
Right.
For me, it was about the impact, about the quality, about the early learning experience that I knew these kids would just flourish from had they been able to get it. And so a lot of people say, what do you think like your biggest kind of choice for success was? And I really do believe it was the why. The starting of my like seeded entrepreneurial journey was human and impact based, right?
Mhm.
I think when people do things for money initially, like that's their primary goal, I feel like a lot of quality gets lost. And so does the like motivation comes from discipline, right?
Yeah.
So you have to do this every day. And so if your why isn't big enough, or your why isn't like part of your energy, you end up wanting to do something else
Yeah.
or
And you
bailing.
don't want to get out of bed in the morning, or you don't want to do it when it gets really, really hard.
And it gets
Um,
hard every day.
yeah. My why
So,
has shifted over the
mhm,
years,
mhm,
but it always is coming from a deeper place of impact
mhm.
and moving along, because I know, okay, so you sold the centers.
Yep. Then I went
Um,
into long-term care for a little bit because I had a non-compete, which a non-compete just means I couldn't open other Montessori preschools in Canada, all of Canada, which was crazy. Another thing I learned is never sign a non-compete. That's all of Canada.
mhm,
Although nowadays would probably not be able to even be, you know,
mhm,
put through a court, but then I really missed it. So the grief of the sale of a business is something I talk about in my Wealth Masters group because we help people scale and exit businesses for legacy wealth. And the biggest thing I will tell you that no one talks about is the death of your business.
mm,
So it was the death of me. Honestly, I feel like I've died twice in both sales and
mhm.
had to have a rebirth of who I am and what my purpose is. And so I was just talking to a girl yesterday and she's like, we have this offer. She's like, I don't want to take it. It was premature, but it's going to be really good for our family. But what am I going to do? And I swear that is the biggest issue that I had was now what? So the next morning after the sale, you have a minute of like, holy shit, I have all this money in my bank account. Like, what the heck is happening? Like, did this just happen to me? So you have that. And
Yeah.
then the next morning you wake up and you don't have an email. You don't have a phone call. You don't know what to do. You don't even know, like, your book is empty, technically.
Mhm.
I think I got 3 emails that week and they were like, hey, how do you da 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 transfer to take your password out? Like that was the emails I was getting. Meanwhile, I was running 400 staff, right? Or
Yeah.
400 employees, 400 team members for 20 years, you
Mhm.
know? So that whole loss is not talked about. And it's such a huge part of um, your growth and development moving forward. You
Mhm.
can get really down and in a really bad place if you don't have a plan.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot about that too. But yeah, like you said, it's just a very big event for
And it's
folks
kind of like the human experience, because I see a lot of my clients experiencing that with like like their children at certain,
when
your
they
kids
leave.
grow up, they go somewhere else, you're like, who am I, right? Or it's always like career transition or divorce or separation or actual
An
loss.
event, a life event, right? Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, it's the feeling we're after, it's not the thing. So now you have this money and you are like, okay, we're gonna live our lives. We're gonna, like, when were you like, I'm passionate about legacy wealth? Did that start to shift for you?
So I'll tell you, once we sold the first set of schools, I also owned some of the real estate. So I kept the real estate and I started to get what was called passive income, right? So I was like, oh, I kind of love this idea of like owning stuff that pays you not to work. And so I was
Mhm.
like, And, I was coming from a mom, 3 jobs, work, work, work. Work meant that's what you got, right? You worked hard and then you got stuff. That's what we knew. We didn't know anything about investing or saving or anything like that. We knew about saving for a rainy day because there was an absolute catastrophe that was meant to happen at some point in your life.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, um, so I in the second, so after we ended up buying some schools in Omaha, Nebraska, long story short, a broker, sent some stuff across my desk and I was like, why not? I'm a why not person, by the way. You'll notice anytime someone asks me why, I'll say, why not? And then they don't know what to say because everyone always is asking you like, why did you do this? Why did you? And I just figured, I don't know a lot of that, a lot of the answers. And so I just started saying, why not? And people just stop asking you, stop asking you why after a while. And you stop asking yourself why.
Yeah,
I felt
if you
like,
want to move quick and
Mhm,
you're the type of person who trusts your gut and you're just like, I make gut decisions, why not? I've done it before, it's worked out, you figure it out as you go.
mhm. Yeah. And if you keep saying why, you just spiral into like all the reasons why not. Right.
Yeah.
And so I just say why not and try to spiral into all the reasons why I would ever not want to do things. Right. And so mindset is huge. I mean, again, we talked about that a lot ourselves offline, but also in the book, like I wrote, and just in my life, 98% of, I think, who I am and what I've been able to do has come from a really strong mindset. So like believing in yourself and committing to what you believe in and knowing that you can do it, and changing your mindset to be like, no, you know what, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to be the one calling the shots in my life and making the changes that I need to make to be 1% better, today than I was yesterday. And that's really the vibe we go off. But your question was, how did I start, getting into legacy wealth? So I owned these buildings. I was getting rent checks and I was like, this is a really good jam here. Like, I don't have to trade time for money.
Yeah.
So I after I bought the schools in Omaha, same thing happened. We grew the school super quickly this time because I had mentorships and I had the right people and I was in the right rooms, and I paid a lot of money to have way better people than me tell me what I should do, right? It just compressed the timeline. The first time took me 10 years. The second time took me less than 3. We sold for more money. We owned all the real estate at that point. So on the sale of our business, we sold the businesses to private equity again. And then what we did was, because we owned all of the real estate, we coupled all of the real estate together, gave the tenant, who was a corporate entity now, 15-year leases with all the businesses, like all the buildings, and then sold all those leases and the buildings to a REIT, which is a real estate holding company, basically. They bought it, so gave us a huge return because they were buying the net operating income of all of these companies, basically all of these schools, all of the buildings. And so we did something in the States called a 1031. So you can take all of that and flip it into other real estate, and that way you don't pay tax on it, right? So we started to buy Starbucks and O'Reilly's, Taco Bell's, Kinder Cares. We have a huge portfolio of real estate now that pays us monthly. Every first week of the month, our bank account just fills up with all of the passive income. And I work because I love it, but I could literally just be home and live off the, passive income. And I don't even feel like it's work. I mean, I'm coaching, but it's not like I'm reporting 9 to 5. I'm very in a flexible position. But then we had a huge tax bill because I didn't have a business anymore to write all this stuff off. So sat in some rooms with some major billionaires, and they were like, what are you doing paying taxes? I'm like, I don't know, dude, like, you tell me.
Yeah.
And they were
I
like,
like
oh,
the,
geez.
I like the, like, I don't know these things, but I'm
Yeah.
going to surround myself with people who do. And, we can say it all day long, but there's a lot of shame. People are like, I don't know how to answer this. I'm like, you're not supposed to. These people
No.
hang out with each other.
Well, and so I was like, okay, what do you mean? Like, and they're like, oh, Julie, if you buy multifamily or apartment complexes, you can use the write-off, like the negative K1 that you get from purchasing this, you get a depreciation, and that goes against your passive income, and it technically erases your taxes. And I was like, this is illegal. Like, what are you talking about? You people are all nuts. And they're like, oh no, we've been doing it for years. So I call up a few people, end up getting into like real estate. You're buying multifamily, which I never bought an apartment before. I was like, I don't want to deal with tenants, toilets, trash. Like, I want nothing. They're like, oh no, it's passive. Like, you're just an LP, a passive investor in our syndication. I was like, what? So this was the option. I was going to pay $527,000 to the US government, or I was going to invest it in multifamily and take a chance that this money was going to be an investment to make me money in the future, or I was going to lose it all to IRS. So, I mean, it wasn't really a why not for me. It was like, well, I don't see any why nots here. Like, let's
It was
just
like,
move.
let's take the risk. I
Mm.
might be sold. I might be told that this is not going to work, or what if it fails, but this money is going out regardless.
Regardless. So it was
Yeah.
like, is it going to go out in my control or in theirs?
Yeah.
And I'm all about like it being in my control. So I started investing in that. So now we live 100% pretty much passively off all the rental income. And then we eradicate all of our tax through buying apartment buildings. So we own like $600 million in multifamily syndicated. And then we have a big portfolio of our own of triple net. Again, this was slow. Like, we just keep, and any money that we make that we're not using for daily living goes to investing. So a big thing that I can share with you guys, especially women who are like, whoa, how do you do this? One of my biggest mistakes was not starting sooner, to be honest. And number two, keeping money in the bank. So my mentor is Grant Cardone. If anyone knows him, he's a huge multifamily guy, because I needed to learn all the things, and I paid him $100,000 for one-on-ones. So it was not cheap to get a mentorship like this. So being in the rooms with people sometimes does cost you a bit of money. That's why I wrote the book. I want to share everything I can share to people that can't get in those rooms right now and at least get a head start. Why I'm on here today, same reason. I want to let you know, you just need to start somewhere. Start learning that saving your money and having it in the bank is going to give you maybe 5% if you're lucky. If you go into an investment, you have a multiple, you're looking at bigger cash on cash returns. You're looking at steady income to then replace what your active income was, right? Your active income is what you're making from a job or a career. At some point, you're not going to be wanting to do that anymore, right? So everyone's like, well, I invest in 401ks. Okay, great. So 401ks are fully taxable. When you take them out, you're losing 30%. So there's a lot of things I just didn't know. And that's what we were doing too, right? We were putting it in retirement. And so I just saw something yesterday, which I also want to share, but they said the only way a 401k or an RSP will work is if you retire poor.
Interesting.
So think about, like, the only way that you're not going to pay that tax bracket of 30% is if you're poor.
Yeah.
So they basically are conditioning you, right, to follow this life of mediocrity. And we're just not about average. So I'm like, we're allergic to average in our household. We always say that. And so again, doing the things that like people aren't doing to be in the position people won't be, right? And so constantly doing what the 99% won't, so we can be the 1% that will. And we just keep learning. And I'm still in conferences. I'm still going all over. I'm constantly, we call it #able, always be learning, right? Like that is my deal. As much as I can learn from others, I did not know anything. I mean, I literally came from a mom who worked 3 jobs. My grandma was like, didn't ever go to school. My first language was Italian, although I don't look like an immigrant. I was raised in an immigrant family. Hard work, we were not allergic to, but definitely in terms of like financial literacy and knowledge, it's been a grind. And I've just slowly just been acquiring more information and just getting better at
This
it.
is like so top level. They have to go obviously read your book. And then I listened to your podcast as well when you were telling a story about what happened during COVID, when you said something about like locking yourself in a room. You're like, I'm not coming out until I solve this problem, which just goes to show your like, how can I attitude. And, top level, you're like, we did this, we did this, we did this. How do you deal with fear, doubt, what if, when you're in, I say fear and doubt, but it's like those moments where you feel like you're backed into a corner, or what if I'm making a mistake? I'm learning this information. What if I do it wrong? Like, how do you deal with all of those aspects of life as you're learning new skills and implementing?
So it's really hard. I think that you have to continually self-talk. You have to be able to trust, you've done it before, you've gotten through problems before. How did you do that? The COVID thing was funny, but not funny when it happened. They basically said, we're shutting all your schools down. I had 10 locations, 400 staff relying on me for their ability to live, right?
Yeah.
So I came to Beau and I was like, I'm going downstairs in the office and I'm not coming out until I have a solution. And he's like, okay, what? Like, we can manage this. We'll figure this out. I'm like, and I was like bawling, right? I was like, all these people are relying on me. This is all up to me. Like, we're going to go bankrupt. Like, this is millions of dollars. What did I do? I moved our whole family here and then the pandemic happens. Like, that's not up to me. How am I going to? And then I was like, no, girl, stop spiraling, get your shit together, stop crying. So I always have this like breakdown and then break through. It's really weird. That's just how I am. So I break down, I have this huge fit basically. And then I'm like, okay, stop reeling, get downstairs, figure it out. So I went downstairs. I literally brought, like, I still at billionaire status. This is my deal, paper and pen. And I went downstairs and I started putting ideas. How are we going to do this? How can I get around this? What can I do? Can I call the DHHS? Anyways, I had this revelation. It was like 2 a.m. and I came up and I said, we're going to offer emergency service care for all the providers that are in the COVID hospitals. So
Mhm.
we're going to do EMS, we're going to do police, we're going to figure this out, even if it's 10 kids at a time in each classroom. We're going to put a priority list together, blah, 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 blah. Well, would you not know that we had 250 kids on the wait list for that program? And we were the first like provider in Omaha to offer emergency care services. And we turned the closure down in 7 days.
Wow.
So like, but again, I could have went downstairs. I could have just said, we're done. Let's just like, we're done. We're going to close it up. We'll, just bankrupt the businesses, move. And then less than a year later, those businesses sold for 8+ figures.
Wow.
So and usually what I find energetically, which is really weird, right before a huge breakthrough, there's like massive chaos and pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I could cry thinking about it. And like a lot of like emotional stress or blockage. Something happens every single time. Like every time any of these moments happened where there was like a huge return, there was massive chaos, massive resistance, pushing me as a human, like to where I was like, I just want to be done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally 6 months to 12 months, there's a massive breakthrough. So I feel like my entire life has been massive breakdowns with massive breakthroughs. It's just cyclical. I don't know why that happens, or if it's energetically something that happens within me that pushes me to just really come up with some crazy ideas to make things work. But I feel like it's been a consistent thing in my life. Like even my parents' divorce, like big events that happened in our life, massive breakthroughs happened because of them. And when you're saying like, what do you do about fear? Like, I really have I have a lot of anxiety personally. I've always kind of had an anxiety issue. But I feel like it's energetic. So it's really weird too. So people are going to think I'm crazy.
Everything you're saying, I'm like, she's speaking my language. So people are very used to this language. So they're like,
I'm like,
okay,
people
I'm
are going
getting
to
it.
think I'm crazy, right?
And I have theories on all of this. Like when you're like breakdown to breakthrough, it's when I feel like I'm backed into a corner and you're forced to look at your shadows. You're forced to see like the only way out is through. I tell people all the time, like, I don't have the privilege of having a back door. And then, but I think I just don't give myself the privilege of having a back door. And, but you feel that and you're like, once you see the cycles, you're like, okay, I get the game now. Like this has happened over and over again. I don't want to feel it, but the next level's coming.
Yeah. And so when you talk about fear, like my thing with the kids, with everything is like, if you want to get through it, you have to get in it.
Yeah.
Like, period. So as much as it sucks, as much as I hate being in the ocean because there's sharks, I get in it. Yeah. And I continually keep getting in it. On the other side of that door of fear is massive amounts of breakthroughs. It's a whole new world. Now that cyclically it's happening, I feel better about, hey, okay, I'm in that I need to get through it phase right now. So I need to get in it. And I have to just talk myself honestly through it. Some days I'm like, like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this again. And then I'm like, well, yeah, I do. Cause I know that there's just going to be so much more on the other side. And that's like, so people, you're talking about fear, but it can also resound a lot, I think, for folks about life. So like, being with people, being around people, outgrowing people, getting through like the fear of leaving stuff, I never had. And I think that came from the abandonment, honestly, when I was really young. I'm like, I don't need it. I don't need you. I don't need these people. And that's become an issue to me. I have had to work through that. Because energetically, I think I'm in a fight or flight always, right? And so my body naturally goes to, you're going to fight, girl. Like I feel like this little scrappy, I still see this scrappy little 6-year-old, like no one's going to take me down. Like, so I feel like when you say, genetic, not fear, I think I don't have fear because I've lost a lot and still been okay. Right. And so I feel like working through that though, as a young person is hard, but I feel like it's definitely been an asset energetically. And yeah, for me now, because
Mhm.
I just say, like, you got this, girl. Like, you've done harder things. You can do hard shit. Get up.
Yeah.
You can do this. And so I think, yeah, I think a lot of stuff, if you can turn trauma into abundance, or you can turn trauma into chaos, right? I
Yeah.
think it's how you deal with things. And so my energy is just not, I don't look in the rearview mirror. There's a windshield for a reason, and it's bigger, and I don't like looking back.
Yeah.
um, I learn and move quickly. Hmm.
Yeah. And just realizing, I don't know if you've experienced this, but when you're the leader, and I'm using air quotes, but when you're
Yeah.
the visionary always leading, right?
Mhm.
People can push you, like your team, your support, Beau being like, you got this. But when you're the one with the idea and you have to chip away first at it, and then you just constantly do that, you develop deep self-trust. Like, I am okay if I would travel the world by myself, and I know I would be okay,
Yeah.
to the detriment of hyper independence, but
Yes.
also, yeah, it's everything's a blessing and a curse. But I want people to hear that you are not perfect. You still
No.
have feelings. You
Mhm.
navigate life and take risk with these feelings. And I just keep hearing you say, like, why not? Like, and I'm big on desire. So I tell
Mhm.
people to use the journal prompt, wouldn't it be nice if? Don't
Yeah.
tell me you don't know what you don't want. It's
Right.
there. The evidence is there. You just have to have the courage to go after it.
Yeah, and I 1000% agree with you. And I think I always tell people, I kind of have a line, like my clients, or when I'm meeting folks and they ask me questions around fear, I'm totally human. I have anxiety probably every day. Like, I have a fit, or an attack, or like
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff. And I've had anxiety since I can remember, honestly, as a kid. And it's really stupid fears, right? Like, it's not even stuff. I'm not even scared of the big stuff. It's like little stuff that I'm like, what is wrong with you? So I think, though, constantly working through that anxiety
Mhm.
also, like you said, kind of gives you this convincing of yourself that you're going to be okay. Like, you're not
I
going to
also think it
die.
gives people an edge
Mhm.
because you value quality. And sometimes when people are over anxious, like, you take a product or a service to the next level and you over provide. And there is like a shadow to that, but you care.
Yes. So the
Yeah.
hyper independence, totally relate with that, because I'm like, I go to the extremes. And one of the things our folks always say to me is, Julie, you always want to, like, you're always over delivering. I'm like, because I'm always afraid I'm never enough.
Hmm.
Like, do you understand? So, like, that part of you is a trauma, but I've hopefully turned it into abundance for other people, because I use that.
Yeah.
It really propels me to provide excellence in
Yeah.
everything I do. Right. And so when people are like, sad about their past or trauma, I'm like, girl, you have so much in there that you can use, because you're just going to do everything so much better. And it's true, because I overcommit, I over deliver. Like, I'm constantly over providing value for my, I hope, and I always ask them, was that enough value? They're like,
Hmm.
Julie, like, we can't even, like, we don't even know. You just dropped like 19,000 nuggets. We can't even like keep up. And I'm like, are you sure though? Was it enough? Like, that part of me, I don't think will ever go away. And that probably is a little bit from being like left, or, like, there's
Hmm.
things that I'm sure psychologically in the back of my energy, there is a piece of me that's like, I have to keep proving myself, right? And so, but it does propel me to do good work. So I
Yeah.
like that idea. I mean, I think I knew that, but didn't know that. So that was a breakthrough for me on here today.
Hmm.
But one thing I always tell people is, your dream has to be bigger than your nightmare, period.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That is what I tell everybody. Every day when they ask me, I'm like, your dream has to be bigger than your nightmare, because if you have a nightmare and it's anxiety filled and provoked, you're not going to do the thing if it's not big enough
Yeah.
to overcome the fears of that nightmare, right? And so my nightmare is being totally bankrupt, not being able to provide for my family, being sick or unhealthy, or being unhappy. All those things are every day. So that propels me, like, okay, what are we doing next? Like, how are we getting there? What are we doing to avoid all these things? But my dream is always way bigger than any of those nightmares. They're there, like, everyone has them. If you tell me you're an entrepreneur and you don't have nightmares, there's something wrong with you.
I'm like smiling because it's so on the outside, it
Mhm.
is incredibly unrealistic because you probably don't have to work a day in your life, air quotes.
Yeah.
But I have the exact same thing. And
Mhm.
Brian looks at me and says, like, you are crazy. Like, you are relentless. You're never giving up. So, like, and I'm like, yeah, but I kind of feel like those nightmares are there to like push me. Like they're my little buddies. They're like part of my team. I
Yeah.
just can't live. I
In
can't live in an unhealthy state. So I always tell people if you don't understand emotional regulation, you will when you become an entrepreneur or business owner. Like you have to learn to regulate your nervous system. And yeah, you'll still have anxiety, you'll still have fear. You just can't let it get too extreme.
it can't be bigger than you can't let it be bigger than your dream. And
Yeah.
so when you're talking to about Brian, this is Beau. Like every day is like, girl, like you're crazy, like and I think they know us, so they know it. We're just gonna do another thing, or whatever. But that whole idea of pushing past those fears. Everybody has fears. I don't know anybody that doesn't have fears.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not letting them control what happens in my life, right? So,
Your actions.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say that's definitely.
I I agree. You do give lots of value, and I want to be respectful of your time. And I know people are going to want to find more of you, Julie, because you are a wealth of knowledge and just to me like a leader for women, especially women, that change is possible. So, where can people find you, your book, website, all the things?
Yeah, sure. They can find me at thejulieroy.com, which is our
Like
website.
the TheJulieRoy.com. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
thejulieroy.com. And on there, there's a bunch of different tabs you can go into. There's a lot of resources. I try to provide like free downloads, resources for real estate investing, just learning about the trifecta strategy, how to get into, investing. Um, Entrepreneurial stuff. We have a podcast as well. That's glamandgrind.com. It's just really moms. Another friend of mine, childcare owner, we're both multimillion-dollar moms. And so both came from like, very similar backgrounds. And we just talk about all things, right?
Mhm.
Kids and moms and jobs and entrepreneurial stuff and investing and, just little simple things, how to add to your income, passively, whatever. And so
Yeah.
they can find me there as well. But
And
yeah,
your book,
yeah, I can grab it.
yay,
It's
the multi-million-dollar mompreneur. Where can
yeah.
people find this? Your
So
book.
Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles if you're in the States. It's in Canada, Amazon.ca. Although I think it's sold out in Canada right now, but we're working on that. So,
Perfect.
but you can get it on Kindle too, anything that's easy for you.
I love
And
it.
hopefully you'll get a nugget or two in there.
Many nuggets, many nuggets. And I always tell people you don't need to know something. Just start surrounding yourself with it. Like literally go to bed with like a book on, like just brainwash yourself with this information. Sometimes you can't, they say you're the sum of the five people you surround yourself with. Just start surrounding yourself with books and podcasts and just putting it in your mind. You don't need to know what's happening. But
Yeah,
your
always
brain starts focusing on it.
always be learning, right? Like
Yeah.
if you just even keep that hashtag in mind, like I need to just always be learning. We live in Omaha, so Warren Buffett is huge here. Obviously, and he's not a female, but I love him.
Hmm.
But I love what he says because he says like every day, if you even read a page of a book, you're you're expanding your knowledge by 1,000% a year, right? And
Mm.
so like for me, I was like, all I have to do is read one page because I have a hard time reading, but I am now reading everything. I'm reading articles, journals, books. I'm listening to podcasts when I'm doing dinner prep, whatever, right? I'm constantly in my car, my kids, they're learning. I think it's just really important to continue learning and like absorb. There's so much information out here now, guys. Like we don't even have to pay the hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can start, there's so many free resources. Yeah, just putting yourself
Mhm.
in the area of the information. If it's not in the room, get some information in your brain for sure.
I always tell people too, it's amazing what happens when you actually implement the like chapter reviews of people's books. I'm
Yeah,
like, some of that, every time I'm on a plane, I pick a book, I barely read the book. I go to chapter reviews and I'm like, what action items? See, look in your book.
I did that because that's what I do. I go back and I'm like, because I am ADHD 1000%, and so for me, I need to like recap. That's like again, these breakthroughs happen by recap, and so in my book, I put the recap in because I'm like, sometimes people just need to even read the
I would
recap.
go to your book and go to all the recaps,
Yeah,
and then I pick and choose if I
that's
decide
what
I
I
want to read the chapter.
that's what I do as well. So, yep,
I'm
I
like,
think
get to the point. Let's how fast can we move? I'm like,
yeah,
implement.
it's efficiency though, right? Because
Yeah.
at this level, time is money,
Yeah.
right? And time away from our family, return on life, like everything plays a part. And time is the only thing that I can't buy
Mm-hmm.
or you can't buy. We
Mm-hmm.
can't buy time. So
Yeah.
be super intentional about how you spend your time.
Julie, I am so grateful for your time, pun intended, and thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your story and wisdom with everyone listening.
Thank you so much for having me.